Welcome, Penelope Sitter in California, back to Astro Talk Traditional Astrology. Welcome.
Thank you, Volker. Good to be here.
And today we have the highlight after the first meeting. We will do the delineation of Jean-Baptiste Morin de Villefranche, and you need to share your screen for that.
Okay, let me do that. There it is. Are you seeing the chart there?
Yes, I see the chart.
Okay, excellent. Let me just adjust a thing here.
And we have the ascendant in Aries, right?
I do indeed. Thank goodness, I'd have to say, with this chart. Okay, so yes, we're building an image of a person and a life. And we start, I like to think of it as kind of clearing the ground, stepping back and taking a bit of a bird's eye view of the chart, and then laying a foundation, and then working on the putting up the main framing pieces, the corner posts, and the heavy framing pieces, and then then we can move into more detail.
Okay.
So I find it helpful to begin by stepping back from the chart, and so that I make sure I don't notice some things that could slip by. So I like to say, I look for something that stands out. If everything is kind of balanced, then there's nothing particular to notice. But if there's an imbalance, then you take note of it. I start by saying, what's the distribution of the planets through the hemispheres, east and west, and above and below the horizon?
Okay, and that's not balanced, as one can see.
Wow, right? Everything on the east, everything.
And
Um,
yes, and four of them in the house of 12th house.
well, five traditional planets in Pisces in the 12th house,
Yes,
including both lights. I
yes.
mean, it's wow. I mean, it's an extraordinary chart in that way. Like you don't often see something piled up like that in Pisces in the 12th. This is quite something to behold. And so everything above the horizon except Mars, the domicile ruler of the ascendant, below the horizon. So everything, so above and below, east and west, everything on the east, everything above except Mars. And that means, and in this chart, that is everything in quadrant one. You count the quadrants from the ascendant moving in the direction of the primary motion. So quadrant one is between the ascendant and the midheaven. Now, east is the natives' territory. West is the territory of the others. And when you have everything on the east, you live on your territory. If you know people that have this, you can find that it's hard for them to step into your shoes, to step into the other's shoes. They see things from their perspective. You can say, well, dear, I'm having the experience with you that something. And the response you get is, I something. And it's very difficult. So Morin sees things, he stands on his territory and sees things from his perspective. In this chart, I say good. He needs to, given this stellium in the 12th, in Pisces. So the above the horizon is the future and the public world. Below is the past and the more private world. Morin is living in the public world. His private world is his writing, and certainly as he grows older. Um, and he has to be in private to do that. It's a solitary pursuit, but he's oriented toward the public world. And when you're in quadrant, to look at the quadrants, you put together the two hemispheres above on my territory. And quadrant one is being motivated to build up your future and your life. And again, I say, thank goodness, given this chart and all the this stellium in the 12th. And so that is a big focus for Moran. He's highly motivated to build up his future.
Okay.
And then I like to just get a sense of the polarity, masculine, feminine, the quadruplicity, the distribution through the quadruplicities, cardinal, fixed, mutable, and the triplicities, the elements. So it's a really good practice. And Robert Corey teaches this. And when I adopted the practice, it was really a helpful thing. In this chart, you don't need it once you look at the chart. But to start at the ascendant and to just scan when you're looking for anything, just scan counterclockwise around the wheel. So that way you don't miss anything. It's calming. You're not jumping around. It's an excellent habit to develop. But in this chart, we just know there's Mars and there's everything in 12 with Mercury fairly late in the 11th. So let's look at the polarities. The ascendant is a masculine sign. The ascendant ruler is in a feminine sign. The midheaven is in a feminine sign. Mercury is in a masculine sign. Everything else, including both lights, in feminine Pisces.
Okay.
So you can use a little numerical system if you like and give the two principal angles, ascendant and the midheaven, 2 points, and the luminaries 2 points each. 2 points each on the principal angles and the lights, and give the minor planets a point. I've used that system with using the modern planets, so there's 16 points. But you can do something like that. Especially at first, just giving it a number helps clarify it. It makes it simpler, and then you may have less need to actually count. But this is a very feminine, a chart with many feminine placements. And the masculine signs act and seek opportunity. The feminine signs react or respond to responsibility and respond to responsibility. So when I look at this chart, there are things I go, oh, thank goodness he has that. I think, oh, thank goodness he has Aries rising, a masculine sign rising. That's very helpful. And we'll see, Aries is actually an ideal ascendant. Then, and thank goodness he has this Mercury in a masculine sign. So otherwise it would be it is a very reactive chart, but he also has these placements in the masculine signs. Good. Then quadruplicity, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Oh, good. Again, good. Cardinal Aries on the ascendant, cardinal Capricorn on the midheaven, and the cardinal cross. We like this again because and then a cardinal, the Mars, the ascendant ruler, is in a cardinal sign, Cancer. We like this because the cardinal quadruplicity is the most active quadruplicity. It's they are the movable signs. And they're very purposeful. They take an aim, they move toward it, they keep moving until they realize that aim, and then they immediately begin realizing another aim. It's this constant movement towards a goal, and they're focused on that goal. Especially Aries are very focused, can be a very focused sign. Yeah. Did you have a question or?
No, I agree.
Okay. And so that's, if you want to count, we'd count that like 5 points in the cardinal signs. Good. Fixed, Mercury, the only planet in a fixed sign. And then we have all this mutability. Fixed means fixed. It's called also solid signs. It has a lot of inertia. It's fixed. Like Mercury in Aquarius. We'll get to that. And then mutability. All this placement with both lights included and 3 minor planets. Mutable or dual signs do one thing, then another. They'll start something with a goal, kind of like a cardinal sign, but then they'll go, oh, I'm going to jump over here and do this, or I'll do these 2 things at once. I once consulted with a man who had so much immutable signs, and he literally said, well, I really don't know what to do. I have these 2 homes. True story, literally. And I have these 2 women, and I'm really torn. And I have these 2 spiritual leaders, and it's pulling me one way or the other. And my education, and I just said, choose one. That was kind of if he were able to choose one, which would be difficult, it would be resolved. But you can get, you can't, you can lose your ability to move in a direction because you're moving in various directions. But one of the excellent things about dual signs is that it repeats motion. So if you're a writer, you go over the same material again and again. You write it, you write it a little differently. You think it through again. If you're a philosopher, you think it through again. If you're a merchant, you sell something and then you sell it again to someone else or the same person. So there are definitely, if you're learning, you repeat and repeat. That's excellent. So it's good for some things. But again, with these mutable placements, I say, thank goodness for Aries and the cardinality in the chart.
Okay.
Triplicity. Fire is the most active element, and masculine, of course, and the most energetic. And water is, of course, Earth is the most inactive, but water is the second most inactive, and then air comes, and then fire. So fire is fearless. Water, of course, is emotional and reactive as a feminine sign. We're often reactive in our emotions. So again, this Aries is a great help. And we'll get back to that. So the other thing I look at is something called house distortion. If you, there's no house distortion when from the ascendant, the signs move one by one through the houses in order. So if you have Aries rising, then you have Taurus on the 2nd, Gemini on the 3rd, Cancer on the 4th, and so on. But if there's house distortion, you see what you see here, an enclosed sign, 2 enclosed signs here across 2-8, and then on 2 houses, on 2 houses, a pair of houses that oppose each other, you have the same sign, Sagittarius and Gemini, on 8 and 9. And that can appear anywhere in the chart. That yields a lot of information, especially when the angles are participating in the house distortion. But here we don't have that. But it is a nice thing to see, and it does give good information. But he has a cardinal cross. So that's those things. And, this took some time to say, But once you get used to doing that, you do that very quickly. It's a glance or two. So I think it's a good habit. I have found myself going, when I didn't do that, going, oh, I didn't notice there were so many planets above the horizon or something like that. So where do you start? You start after that bird's eye view by laying a 5-part foundation, and that is the assessment of the ascendant, then the midheaven, then the moon, then the sun, and then any unusual or extraordinary considerations which we've already noticed in this chart because they're so very evident. So you start with the ascendant. Why the ascendant? Because the ascendant is the most important point in the chart. You're building the image of a person and that person's life. And the person is the receiver of the influence, received through the houses. The houses receive and determine the influence from the celestial bodies. And so does the subject of the influence, also called the receiver. The subject receives and determines. The same influence falling on a different person will have a different effect. Or the same influence falling on a human being and a horse will have a different effect. Moran uses the example, essentially the same generative influence falling in the same way, he doesn't say it that way, on a human being as on a horse. In the human will produce a human, and in the horse will produce a horse. So you have to always keep in mind, who am I talking about? It varies, of course, by species, by plant, animal, mineral, and by social, religious, and cultural background, sex, age, and by individual persons, and in the same person at different times. You need to keep in mind who you're talking about, under what circumstances.
Okay.
And if that, you see the person in the ascendant and the first house. If you forget who you're talking about, you're going to have a much more difficult time understanding what these influences will do and signify in the life. So you begin with the ascendant. Moran, I'm going to read a few passages from Moran for a couple of reasons. One, because I think Moran's a beautiful writer, and I think he's very clear. And if some people find the way he writes to be difficult, but once you get used to it, I think once you get familiar with it, I think you can come to really appreciate it. So he says about the ascendant, he makes some, well, I'll read it. The essential significations of the first house, of course, life, temperament, and so on, are the first of all the accidents and the foundation of the rest, which necessarily are to be set out first, so the rest may be. That's a strong statement. It's a dense statement. Moran's statements are dense. So we began with the ascendant. If you enter the chart, if you're just going to demonstrate a technique, you don't have to enter the chart through the ascendant. But you just can go right to the technique you want to demonstrate. If you're intending to delineate a chart, if you don't start with the ascendant, if you don't enter the chart through the ascendant, you're lost before you've begun. You walk in the front door of the building. You don't come in through the bathroom window or the chimney or even the back door. So that's so important, else you're at sea. The next thing is the midheaven. And this is just a little introduction just to point out how very important these two angles are, ascendant and midheaven. Ascendant is the person and the life, the person's character, temperament, mental nature, intelligence or inborn talent, health, physical constitution. And that's whose chart it is. The midheaven, of course, is actions and endeavors, honors, and the results you reap.
May I ask you, does this
Yes.
mean in your practice, according to the determination doctrine by Morin, that you don't analyze the ascendant completely before you go to the midheaven? Because if you analyze the ascendant completely, you would go to the ruler and the dispositor of the ruler and all that, and you didn't do that. So you're not going from the ascendant to the midheaven, right?
No, we haven't analyzed the ascendant. I'm giving an introduction to emphasize the importance of the ascendant and the midheaven,
Oh,
because
okay, okay, okay.
people, it's so important to emphasize the importance of these two angles. And this quote I'm about to read will give you a sense why. We're not assessing them yet, but it's so important. And this is one reason why I think quadrant houses are so important, and why I think houses that put the ascendant on the first cusp and the midheaven on the 10th cusp. One reason why I think this, because these points in themselves, and when you consider directing them, I think that comes out. But here's what he says. He says this is how you assess a house. He gives some rules for assessing a house. This is book 21, section 2, chapter 12. And it's a nice chapter summarizing a number of the doctrines that he has set out in book 21. And he says, he tells how to do it. And then he says, from such a consideration alone of the planets in the first or 10th and of the rulers of those houses, a judgment can be made at the outset whether the geniture is fortunate or unfortunate. And then that's a very strong statement. Then he goes on to say, I think this is where he says this, but I have never urged hasty judgment, but circumspection, lest one dishonor oneself and the art, himself and the art. But that's a very strong statement, and that shows you these two angles. That's why we start there and recognize that that is like the foundation or the most basic framing structure of the image that we're building. So let's go to the ascendant. As I said, I'm going to say it again, always enter the chart through the ascendant. It's the place that most strongly or noticeably ties earth and sky. Morin has a nice passage but he says it very nicely, saying essentially, what is rising in the chart is arising in the world. So we cast a chart for a birth, or a natal chart for a birth, or we cast it for an inception. So Zoltan Mason, the teacher of my teacher, Robert Corey, would say the ascendant is 80% of the chart. And he would actually and literally, early in his practice, place his finger on the ascendant during the delineation. So he would never forget who he was talking about. And there's a story told, and I think it is true, that when a student asked Mr. Mason, in an hour-long consultation, how long do you spend on the ascendant and the first house? And he said 60 minutes. So again, I'm emphasizing this because people don't tend to sometimes just jump into the chart and don't recognize the importance of the ascendant.
Okay.
This is the embodied person, the native and the native's life, and as I said, character, temperament, mental nature, moral nature, too, intelligence, or inborn talent, body, physical constitution, health.
How
It's the
about
person.
how about the soul? Is that in the ascendant as well?
No,
Okay.
and
It's
I
just a question because in tradition that would be in the ascendant as well. Okay. Go.
Oh, would that be in the tradition? I would say no.
Okay.
I would say uh,
No,
this.
we're doing Morinus today, and if it's not in his doctrine, that's okay.
No, I can't. I won't. Zoltan Mason and Robert. Zoltan Mason taught something that, as I understand it, although, and I want to learn it, that is a kind of doctrine of the soul. And I am not sure how he derives it from Morin, but Morin was a very religious man, a devout Roman Catholic in 17th century France. So I think more of the sun and the moon, and then the minor planets lining up with the sun and the moon based on their whether they're masculine or feminine. And I am kind of making it up for myself, to tell you the truth.
Okay.
But that's more how I think of it, a kind of alchemy of the soul, or and the way the lights come into the chart and their relationship to the ascendant, because how is the embodied person connected with the soul? But this is more me and my
Okay.
imagination and wanting to understand.
Okay.
So this is about life. In fact, my Jyotish teacher said to his guru, oh, I want to go up to the Himalayas and live in a cave. I want to meditate. And his teacher said, well, then don't bother studying Jyotish. This is about life. And that's what the ascendant is, an embodied person engaged in constructing and living a good human life, and encountering the problems in doing that, and using the gifts and the strengths in doing that, working with the weaknesses and the problems. So it's about an embodied person, and that's the focus. The value is life and living it well, building it up and living it well. So, and just to say this, in this doctrine, and you can, some of the things are extrapolated from Morin that he doesn't say directly, but this is clearly, he may say this directly, but the triplicities of houses, 1, 9, 5, 10, 6, 2, and so on, complete what the cardinal the cardinal, the angular house of the triplicity is the core of the triplicity, and the other two houses in the triplicity support the goals of the angular house. And to complete the image of, say, a person's worldly good, you go 10, honors and career, 6, work, and 2, wealth. So you want, and you like to see them connected. Well, when it comes to the person, the complete human personality is 1, 9, God, and 5, children, or the creative life, or giving love to others. Morin says that the trine is the aspect of love. So it's the love of the divine and aspiring to something greater than simply being, it's aspiring to something greater. And that doesn't have to be your idea of God or the divine. It can be ethical, it could be some other kind of philosophy, but something that lifts us as humans, and giving love to others through the 5th. And there's a very nice doctrine associated with this, which is 1-7 is war or partnership. But how do you make sure it's not war? Well, it can be, even if you try to do this, if there are too many malefics if there's too much malefic influence on the 7th, you enter the other's territory. You can see my cursor, right?
Yes, okay.
Okay.
I,
You entered.
but
Go ahead.
I, I would suggest that we do a little bit more concentrating on the chart of Morinus, because otherwise we are running out of time, because that will be a 5-hour session if we continue like
Okay.
this.
All right.
Why don't we just do what you would do if Morinus was your client, and you delineate his chart, and not the whole doctrine, because that's
Okay.
we did that last time.
Well, sort of. Yeah, partly. Um, uh, okay, I'll do that, but I'm not going to do it like it's a consultation. I do want to get in doctrines as well. But
Just concentrating on the chart with the determination doctrine of Morinus.
I understand. I
Yeah, okay.
understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. So, but yeah. Um, well, your question about the divine got me there. I wanted to answer it more fully. That's why I did that.
Okay.
Um, so let me see then. How shall I? So let's go then to the sign on the ascendant. You're looking for motivation, and you're looking for what motivates the native, and toward what is the native directed. And you're looking for the strength and persistence in the native's motivation. To live a human life, you need strength, you need to act on your motivation. So the sign, as we've said, is Aries, masculine cardinal fire, an ideal sign of the nature of Mars, because the signs take on the nature of their ruling planets, especially their domicile rulers, but also their rulers by exaltation and triplicity. It's ideal because of the characteristics, the most energetic sign, the most active, courageous, and always aiming toward a goal. The ascendant ruler is where you go next. And again, you scan from the ascendant, but we don't really have to here because we know Mars is here alone, below the horizon, in the third house. And we say a natural malefic in a debilitated state. He's fallen in Cancer. It's a cardinal sign, but Mars does not function well in a cardinal sign. So first you go nature, malefic, celestial state, not good, fallen. And from the celestial state, you get the quality of the influence. There's something weak and even and Moran uses the word corrupt in planets in debility. There's something that's going to be a significant problem. And you look at this Mars, he's late in the third, conjunct the fourth house cusp. And if you don't want me, I'm going to go into this 5-degree rule. If you aren't interested in me doing that, let me know.
You do what you do when you delineate with the Morinus technique. Just
Well,
normal delineation.
Well, yeah, but I'm also trying to teach how to do it. Again, if you say no, I don't want to hear that, I'm fine. I can.
Well, the teaching is not the focus today. Today is the following our first session. Today is the demonstration how it's done in practice. So it's basically only the Morin technique applied to his own chart.
Okay, last week you told me I could do the doctrines when we were doing the delineation, but that's fine. I can shift. I'm mutable. I got that mutability. So, well, the 5-degree rule, if you want to know what Moran says about it, look at book 18, chapter 15. He says it's not about the 5-degree rule. Ptolemy's been misunderstood and misapplied. And it's about the planet being within its orb of aspect to the following cusp, following in the primary direction. So, what is Moran motivated toward? What is he directed toward? What is he motivated to realize through the where the ascendant ruler is? And the fourth house is, of course, the parents and the ancestors and the past and the home and real estate and the country. So he's motivated, he's directed toward, and very much, we say, ruled from, which is a very strong statement. Moran is ruled from the fourth and also the third, because Mars' body is in the third house. So the third is siblings and also writing, studying, learning, thinking, communicating, especially through writing or other means of communication. So those things very much motivate Moran. He's directed toward them. It's a house combination. The first connects with the fourth and the third. He combines his personality with matters of the fourth, and the past is certainly true in Moran's case. And there are things about his parents that can come out, particularly his mother, and towards writing and studying and learning. And that's certainly true. But there's going to be some serious problems. Here's what Moran says. And if you don't want me to do the quotes, let me know. But
No, if it's concerning with this chart, it's okay.
Okay. Moran says of any planet in debility, not just a natural malefic. About any planet in debility, he says this: if it is exiled or fallen, it will confer nothing beneficial, or it will act in a corrupt manner and will bring destruction. Now, that's a very strong statement that makes you immediately start looking for some amelioration. And what is he destroying? He's destroying the ability to these are fortunate houses. He's destroying or seriously damaging in some way. Again, we're going to ask for amelioration. The ability to realize the fortunate matters of the third and fourth house. And Moran makes nice statements about what it is you're looking for when you're assessing what the planet will do. What is the judgment you're seeking to make? And he says it a few times in book 21, but he says you're looking at whether the planet will confer the accidents that are attributed to the house, or whether indeed it will deny them, hinder them, remove them once granted, or affect them either fortunately or unfortunately. Grant, deny, hinder, remove, or affect them fortunately or unfortunately. That's a very nice thing to keep in mind. What can this planet do? Which one of those things will it do? Or will it do some of more than one? The other thing I want to quote here from Moran is the effect of a debilitated planet in or ruling the first or 10th, again showing how very important these houses are, the ascendant and the midheaven, and the houses 1 and 10. As for planets in or ruling the first or 10th house, their celestial state and determination, which means placement among the houses, determination, are especially noted. For badly conditioned by celestial state, they are very bad for the significations of those houses. And then he says, especially if, and goes on. So Moran is looking, we like the ascendant, the sign on the ascendant, which is where you start and which is the strongest determination. But we're troubled about this Mars. And this immediately, when you see the ascendant ruler, and from the things I just read from Moran, you know that Moran needs to solve this. He needs a solution to the condition of this Mars. And, fortunately, Mars is conjunct the angle because we want Moran to be strong. And if Mars were buried in a cadent house, particularly one below the horizon, there'd be a weakness. So we're glad that he has the strength of being angular because that's Moran. But on the other hand, when you see a debilitated malefic, you do kind of want to tuck it away in a cadent house. It's on the angle, it acts more strongly and can act more efficaciously in the chart as a whole to do some harm. But he, thinking of the fourth house meaning, he dug into the past and into the intellectual past and the astrological past, and was a fighter for the past at a time when the world was changing so very radically, intellectually, in a time of enormous ferment and wars and a terrible 30-year war, and just so much happening. And France, especially with Richelieu, consolidating the country and centralizing the power in the king and reigning in the nobles. It was just a time of ferment in so many ways. And Moran, in the midst of that, was a fighter, a warrior for the valuable things of the past. And did he always wage that fight in a polite and restrained and unemotional way? No. Was he unreactive? No. We're talking about an emotional and reactive man, passionate. It's a passionate Mars, but it's reactively passionate and emotional. So also, that's especially true. This is a form of house combination. When you see a planet late in a house by body and conjunct the cusp of the following house, there comes a combination. So we can see the third and the fourth house connected. So how is he waging this fight? Verbally, by learning about the past and fighting for what he has learned. And he, you know, darn well, looking at the Aries ascendant and this Mars, angular and also connected with the third, that he's going to be involved in fights, intellectual fights. We see a Gemini on the cusp of the third. And we also see that Mars is opposite the ninth house, and every house has as its accidental meanings the essential meanings of the opposite house. So this Mars is determined also to the ninth by opposite house location and to the 10th by opposite house location. So he's going to, the ninth is God and philosophy and belief and science. Also, of course, international travel and higher education. So Moran's going to tie, that Mars is going to tie those things together with his career and his honors from the connection with the 10th. And that Mars also opposes the MC and disposes and rules it by exaltation. So the one thing you'll see again and again in Moran's chart is the complexity, and even just the placement of this Mars gives a complexity that brings 3, 4, 9, and 10 together. And Moran did become a warrior. Moran gets criticized for not being a nice guy, even in more recent times. And he certainly made enemies, as we'll see. But we should actually be saying, thank goodness this man was such an intense, unrelenting cardinal sign, Mars, Aries rising, cardinal cross, was such an unrelenting fighter for astrology and for the philosophical doctrines, which include certainly the geocentric cosmos. He thought, yeah, that's what's out there in the stuff-based world. But given our modern views, we can understand, no, that's not what's out there in the stuff-based world, but that's a model, because there are all kinds of philosophies of science, and some of them take the view it's not the models and the theories are guiding, they adequately represent the realities. They don't necessarily represent the thing. Like Bohr's atom isn't a thing, and wasn't even, I think, considered a thing when he developed the model. But that wasn't available in the 17th century, that way of thinking. So Morin engaged in intense fights. And again, we have to see three. We have to see Mars angular for the strength, and 3, 10, and 9 connected here. So he also...
You do know that I'm waiting for the next step, which would be Mars is in Cancer, and there is somebody ruling Cancer, and that should be a playing factor, right?
Yeah, but I'm also trying to interpret as I go, and
Okay.
I'm going to get there.
So basically, what you're telling me is that you do not include the ruler of the Cancer in this step of the delineation.
No,
Okay.
no,
Okay.
that's not the case. I was just wanting to focus on this Mars
Okay.
before I go to the dispositor. So he also got in fights with neighbors and quarrels of kind of non-intellectual disputes. I just want to give people a sense of, when you see a Mars like that, you're the kind of things you're looking at just in that planet. But and if we have time, I can put this a bit in the context, because there are 4 accidental determinations of planets, and the last one of which is that the subject and the world in which they live is a determination of what you can expect. So that this being in 17th century France in a number of ways was interesting, having to do with duels and some other things. So so we always remember the ascendant. We have cardinal fire rising. That's who we're talking about. And this is the Mars that is ruling that Aries. We're going to see problems. We have to look for the amelioration. And one way you can ameliorate a planet in essential debility is through its dispositor. And in fact, whatever condition it's in, if it's not in domicile, you always look at the dispositor. And the domicile dispositor is the moon. And we don't have to look long to know where that moon is. The moon, of course, is in the 12th house in Pisces. The dispositor does affects the planet's celestial state and its terrestrial state. So this helps the celestial state very much, because this moon in Morin's system is in honor of triplicity, because she is in a sign of an element in which her domicile is found. So that lifts the celestial state. And I'll read again from Morin. If a planet is badly affected by celestial or terrestrial state, or both, but its ruler, he uses the word ruler for dispositor, is well affected, harm and misfortunes will be signified in the beginning, but benefit and good fortune will follow. especially if that planet applies to its ruler by a fortunate ray. So this helps the celestial state, this moon, very much, because from fall to honor of triplicity.
Okay,
And it
I have a
is,
question. I have a question for that part.
yes, yes,
In Morin's doctrine, we have certain steps to follow, and the last step is looking at the aspects. Does that mean that in this step we are now in, the dispositor, the moon, the ruler of Cancer, helping Mars, to put it mildly, we do not look at the aspect with Saturn, the conjunction. That comes later, is that right? Or do you at this point, because you see this conjunction quite obviously, you do not include the correlation between Moon and Saturn at this moment of delineation into the question, how much can the Moon help Mars? Because it could be that the conjunction reduces the help, doesn't it?
yes, because that is part of the celestial state.
Yeah,
The
but
first,
but but you wouldn't do this at this step in the delineation. You would wait till you come to the final aspect delineation part, right?
well, I can't help but noticing it. And another thing, Moran um, makes a strong statement about how the lights in a fortunate house give splendid results, but in an unfortunate house give remarkably poor ones. So that's in my mind as I look at this, and that's Saturn, the moon separating from Saturn and applying to no other planet. That is in my mind. The most important thing is the moon. And I will say I'm looking for amelioration. The most important thing is the sign occupation. But I agree with you, or I agree with you that you can't not see that Saturn, the moon
So
separating
so
from.
so that means we are not following strictly the rules of Moranus if we look at the Saturn at this moment, right?
I wouldn't say that. That's a good question. I'd have to be sure about this. The most important, here's how I would say it now, and I'd be happy to be corrected by Moran himself or someone who knows better. But I would say the most important thing, which is always the case in celestial state, is sign occupation. But the moon is somewhat, so that's the most important thing, that she's in triplicity. But I do notice that she's with Saturn. That does harm her celestial state. But yeah, I'd be happy just to stay with the moon is in triplicity and come back to the conjunction with looking at the aspects.
But that would mean that we would miss at this stage in the delineation, we have a situation where we are looking for help from Mars, and we're looking at the moon and we say it helps, and we leave it at that moment. And so it's a sort of a confusing conclusion because the rules of the doctrine are not really very good for this situation. Would you agree?
No, I think
Okay.
they're excellent for this situation. As I said, the Saturn harms the moon. So that Saturn, this isn't about the doctrine. This is about some ignorance or uncertainty in myself. And I'll be happy to get back to you about that. I can look into it
No,
to
no,
see.
we are doing it now. It's
No,
just,
I know, but what I'm saying is it's not the doctrine. If there's a fault here, it's my fault,
oh,
not
okay,
not the
okay,
doctrine.
okay.
And
So what
but
would what would you personally
what I've said,
what would you now what would you do now? Would you at this moment of the delineation integrate the conjunction with Saturn and say Moon helps, but is a little bit the Saturn hinders it in the full help? Would you do that you personally now or not now?
I wouldn't do it now
Ah,
because
okay.
it's.
Okay,
And
then continue. Yeah, okay.
let me tell you why. I'd like to tell you why. Because it's you consider the most principal things, the most powerful things first. And as you said, we're looking for amelioration. The
Yes.
most powerful thing is that this moon is in honor of triplicity. That is a powerful thing. And the damage from the conjunction to Saturn, and this is my limitation, my ignorance. If that Saturn harms that amelioration, it's minor compared to the moon being in triplicity, and minor compared to the other thing Moran mentioned in that quote, and to which I think you referred, which is that there's a trine, you may have referred, a trine between a separating trine between the Mars and the moon. And that is a help. It's a fortunate ray, as Moran says in this quote, that is helpful, very much helpful that it's a trine, but it's not applying, but still a fortunate ray with a connection by aspect.
Yeah, but that would be an aspect as well. So if we do not delineate the conjunction aspect at this stage of the delineation, we should probably not do the trine at this stage of the delineation.
No, that's wrong, because we're talking about the moon functioning as a dispositor. And in just what I read, harm or misfortune will be signified in the beginning, but benefit and good fortune will follow, especially if that planet applies to its ruler, dispositor, by a fortunate ray. Well, it's a fortunate ray, though it's separating.
Okay.
So you can take that. We're talking, the reason it's very different is because we're talking about the planet and its dispositor. That's the relationship we're engaged in.
Okay.
So, of course, that aspect matters a great deal. Moran says very interesting things, other very interesting things in book 21. And we may get to that, some of that here, about there being an aspect between a planet and its dispositor. Well, I plan to get to it in a few moments.
Okay.
One of those things. But no, that's a very important aspect. And I will dip into a little doctrine here. Every planet has an analogy. Every aspect has an analogy to one of the minor planets. The trine has an analogy to Jupiter. It's the aspect of love, Moran says. And Jupiter is the planet that is analogous to it. When you're to assess the quality with which a form of aspect will operate in a chart, one of the things you do is say, well, what's the condition of the analogous planet in this chart? Oh, Jupiter's in domicile. So the trines will act very well. And look at all these trines from these 5 planets in Pisces to Mars, to the ascendant ruler. The trine is a very important aspect, and Mercury's trines. Mercury's trine has a trine that's very important. Notice, and again I say, thank the good Lord, there are no interplanetary squares and no squares to the angles, to any angle. There's one opposition, Mars opposite the midheaven to an angle. Then these 5 Pisces planets square the 2nd and 8th house cusps, but they're not angular. And I would say that is take money, the 2nd house, wealth. That shows good and bad coming to Moran through those squares to the 2nd, concerning wealth. Sometimes he got some money, sometimes he didn't get money he thought he should get, and it was an important thing. Money was a significant problem in Moran's life until later in his life.
So we are taking the trines all together now to delineate the Mars.
No, well, I wasn't going to do that because I was talking. I'm not going to do that because I'm talking about the dispositor.
Okay.
And
so we only take the trine of Moon, and we wait for later for the other trines.
Well, where I'm what we look at next is the exaltation dispositor of Mars. And you always look at the domicile ruler, but frequently, and I always look at the exaltation dispositor. Morin often does too, and has a chapter on looking, including the exaltation ruler. And where do we see that? Of course, Jupiter is in the 12th, and also in high honor, and even higher honor than triplicity, he's in domicile, and he's not separating from Saturn, and his condition is excellent. He is combust the sun. Morin says that combustion does not destroy the virtue of the planet, and he makes the argument that think of the sun conjunct Saturn. Are you going to say, oh, that Saturn does nothing to the sun? No, you're not going to say that. So he says it renders things invisible. And has Morin been invisible? You bet. He's been amazingly invisible because of the 12th house, because of Pisces, because in part this combustion. And you find that the matters of the houses a planet rules, the planet it can become invisible, but relatively invisible, but the matters of the houses the planet rules can as well. So again, we have a trine, and again, a separating trine. So this Mars gets help. And when you have a Mars that can be out of control because he's in an exaggerated condition, and exaggeration harms. This Mars can be unrestrained in his emotional reactivity. He's also a masculine planet in a feminine reactive sign. But Jupiter is a moderating influence. So this disposition to Jupiter, Morin, when he was younger, was pretty unrestrained. He got himself into some really serious scrapes. And but as he grew older, which many of us do, but Morin quite noticeably, became much more moderated in his behavior, not always in his speech or in his quarrels, in his disputations, his polemics, or in his more personal and non-intellectual quarrels. But he had more of those in his youth, I believe. He had apparently a lot of quarrels, personal quarrels and encounters. So this has very much helped, especially through time, but even in the moment, it's helped in its celestial state. But terrestrial state, no, because that quote above from Morin said, if it's in the poor celestial or terrestrial state, the dispositor also affects the terrestrial state of a planet, because where you see a planet's dispositor, it is as though you see the planet. So now this Mars gets pulled into the 12th house in one sense. Of course, it continues. He continues to always act in the 4th and the 3rd, but he also gets pulled effectively into the 12th and acts from there. A planet begins an action and its dispositor continues it. And if you take the final dispositor, the dispositor of the dispositor, which we don't have here because everything comes to Jupiter, the final dispositor completes the action, which can be a very useful doctrine. So the terrestrial state, this Paul, Mars, of course, because everything gets disposed to the 12th. Nothing comes out of the 12th. So this by disposition. So this Paul of the 12th house is falls over everything in Morin's life. And this Mars continues to cause problems, even though there's this amelioration through disposition. And the other thing I want to say about it being a fortunate aspect, the trines act as kind of like filters. The best of a planet comes much more readily through a fortunate aspect, trine or sextile. And the bad of the planet is in part filtered out through the aspect, significantly in part, although a a debilitated malefic can do harm through a trine. And through an unfortunate aspect, which Moran has virtually none of, the more problematic characteristics of the planet come through much more readily, and the better ones are filtered out. So this is another reason we're very glad that Moran, he has trines, many trines, and he has important sextiles, and just this one opposition to an angle. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention about the dispositor and these aspects, when a planet is in aspect with its dispositor, the planet depends more on its dispositor in its action and is more subject to it. And both the planet and the dispositor work more efficaciously. So that's another reason why these trines to both the dispositors are so important, so that Mars is more subject to that excellent Jupiter and that good, the moon in triplicity.
Okay.
So the other thing I want to say about these dispositors, I want to point to Moran's doctrine of the secondary ruler of a house or of a planet, but particularly of a house. The dispositor of the ascendant ruler or the ruler of any house is the secondary ruler of that house. And this is a very strong statement Moran makes about them. This is another amelioration, except by terrestrial state, although we can find some good in the terrestrial state. In judging of the significations of the horoscope, the ascendant, Moran uses the term horoscope properly to mean the ascendant, because that term does not actually refer to the whole chart, except now it does, is used that way. In judging of the significations of the horoscope, not only the ruler of the horoscope is taken into account, but if this is in another sign out of domicile, the ruler of this sign, which I call the secondary ruler of the horoscope, also is to be taken into account. For on it, the principal virtue for the effect and the chief part of judgment frequently depend, as I have found frequently in many genitures, and so also for the ruler of the midheaven, the sun, and so on. The principal virtue for the effect and the chief part of judgment frequently depend, as I have found in many genitures. So again, that gives much more emphasis to these planets in good celestial state, but in an unfortunate house. Next we go, so we've looked at the sign rising, its domicile ruler. And I'm not going to go to the sun except to say a couple of words, just that I also always look at Moran counsels that it's the exaltation, the ruler by exaltation of a house will also have an effect. So that's the sun exalted in Aries and goes where? Right to the 12th house. Where else? And he's peregrine in a benefic sign too. For Moran, simply peregrine is a neutral condition, but it can be made better, and even better than some planet in honor, by being in a benefic sign, having good aspects. Here the sun is flanked by the two major benefics in honor of exaltation, Venus, and domicile, Jupiter, and having the polarity of the planet match the polarity of the sign. That's not the case here. But he's in a benefic sign with good aspects. He does get a trine from Mars, but these benefics are stronger. So this is a sun, peregrine, simply peregrine, but beneficially, but a little better than neutral, but essentially neutral from being peregrine, but a little better than neutral, certainly not causing a problem. Peregrine planets act weakly, but this gives it, this improves the state.
Does that mean if you take the sun as exalted in Aries, that it has a direct influence on the Mars because of his exaltation role in Aries as a secondary ruler, right?
Uh, I missed a word you said.
I mean, what I'm trying to understand is, if you have the sun, and the sun is exalted in Aries, right? And Morin was saying the exalted planet is a secondary ruler of the ascendant, in this case Aries. That means it's a secondary dispositor of Mars, right?
No, the sun is not a secondary ruler. Here's a little, he's the exaltation ruler.
Yeah,
The
that's what I
second,
mean.
well, but I'm telling you that that's not what a secondary ruler is. A secondary ruler is the dispositor of the ruler. He is, you could, I use the term second ruler, and Morin uses that term. Here, look at Taurus in the first. Taurus enclosed in the first. Morin has four rulers of the first house: Mars and the sun by exaltation of the ascendant.
Yeah, but that's what I meant. The sun by exaltation is a ruler. That's what I
That's
meant.
exactly that, and that's what I had said.
Yeah,
And you're exactly,
that's what I meant. But if the sun is a ruler of Aries by exaltation, and it's very well placed between the two benefactors, Venus and Jupiter. Doesn't that mean that the Mars is helped by the Sun as well,
the ascendant.
directly?
The ascendant is helped, but I want to just get the terminology correct. He's not the secondary ruler. You could call, I was going to say, Morin uses the term second ruler for the domicile ruler of the second sign in the house. And here we have
Okay,
Taurus.
I understand.
So
But you also said that the Sun is a ruler by exaltation,
that's right. That's exactly right.
and
Yes,
that
you're right.
however you number that, it's a ruler
Mhm.
by exaltation of
Yes.
Aries. And as far as I understood Moral, like you quoted him, doesn't that mean a direct help from Mars?
Well, I don't see the sun as the main thing that, excuse me, um, it's the sun's in the 12th house. So by terrestrial state, my dog is starting to bark. She wants to go out. Do you mind, Volker, if I just let her out?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I
Okay.
stopped I stopped the
Okay.
recording. Okay,
Okay. Yeah.
continue.
Okay. So just to get the terminology straight, because, secondary ruler, dispositor of the ruler. And you could say the secondary ruler of the ascendant by exaltation through the sun is Jupiter, the domicile ruler of Pisces. And you could even say Venus is a secondary ruler of the sun, of the ascendant through the sun. So you have to keep the terms straight.
Yes,
And you
okay.
would, so to do that, secondary ruler is the dispositor of the ruler. The of any ruler, even of the ascendant or of the enclosed Taurus in this case, or you can say that even through the as Jupiter as the dispositor of the exaltation ruler. So I use the word, and Miranda, second ruler for a planet that rules the second sign in the house, and secondary ruler, as I've defined it, and exaltation ruler for what the sun does here, rules
Yes.
by exaltation. So I just think those terms,
Yeah,
it's
I understand. But that means that we have a lot of rulers helping Mars.
well, they help, helping Mars.
Well, helping the ascendant, let's put it this way.
Okay.
And indirectly, because of Mars being the ruler of the ascendant, helping Mars indirectly, right?
Well, there are trines here
Well,
from this planet.
that's additional. At the moment, I'm just looking at the exaltation situation of the Sun and the exaltation situation of Venus in Pisces, and then the domicile ruler Jupiter, and everything is and Jupiter, and then the trines come additionally. So we have a lot of help for Mars.
I don't see that sun. That sun doesn't help Mars' celestial state
Okay.
the way a dispositor would. He and the sun, that sun is a big mixed bag. He signifies powerful hidden enemies. Look at him right on the cusp, very powerfully influencing the 10th house. Powerful hidden enemies. And that was true in Morin's life. He particularly identified Cardinal Richelieu, especially because of what happened with the in the with the what's called the Longitude Prize. So that's especially Richelieu because a powerful hidden enemy of what nature? An ecclesiastic nature. Why? Because he's conjunct Jupiter with an analogy to ecclesiastical people, and that Jupiter rules the ninth. So that definitely describes Richelieu as a very powerful hidden enemy, and Richelieu's power was great and often very dangerous. Um, and and the sun signifies illness, but the sun also does good things. Planets can do good and bad things. I don't say because he's in a peregrine state in an unfortunate house, although conjunct his two dispositors and who are benefics in high honor. um, I don't, he's not, I don't go, oh, that really helps that sun. That's not my assessment,
Okay.
though. Yeah, but not helping Mars. Although for honors, that sun becomes important, and his connection with Mars becomes important. So planet can be good for one thing and bad for another. All these planets in the 12th are going to be bad for something. They're going to indicate illness. They're going to signify illness, hidden enemies, misfortune, loss, exile, and other 12th house meanings. So,
So
um,
we are basically we are still at delineation the ascendant, right?
yes, and because I'm using this as a way to show some principles of delineation. So when we get to the midheaven,
Yes.
we'll go much more quickly, and we'll also just say a few words about Taurus being enclosed. And if we won't do a full delineation like we're doing on the ascendant, but you could do that. And but we won't be doing that because we're going to be demonstrating how to do it, some of the basics of how to do it. And we don't need to go over all this again.
Okay.
So the sun, um, yeah, goes to the 12th in,
Do you do the sun before the MC
yes,
ascendant? So
we're still,
you start delineating the ascendant and then the sun.
no, I'm only going to the sun, not because he's the sun, but because he's the exaltation ruler of the ascendant. We're
Oh,
still
okay.
on the
Okay.
ascendant.
We are
Yeah.
still on the ascendant delineation. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's leave it there. The one thing I want to say is Mars gets disposed to the 12th, to the moon, And then that's his dispositor. His final dispositor is Jupiter. Does he get out of the 12th? No. The sun goes to the 12th and gets disposed to Jupiter and to Venus by exaltation. Does the sun get out of the 12th? No. Everything goes to the 12th. All the house rulers go to the 12th, all except Mercury, although the orb of Mercury, by his orb, Mercury is conjunct this 12th house cusp, but he's definitely an 11th house planet. I have to put the emphasis there.
Okay.
But he does have a 12th house determination. So you see every house. So here's the ruler of Scorpio, like the ruler of the ascendant, Aries, doesn't go directly to the 12th, but then gets disposed to the 12th. The rulers of the second and third and the sixth, the ruler Mercury goes to the 11th, but gets disposed to the 12th, finally disposed to Jupiter. Everything goes to the 12th, nothing goes out. One thing you like to see when you see a planet in an unfortunate house is especially the 12th, because the 8th is kind of a special case because it's death, or it can be the threat of death, but death primarily, and other people's money, and has other derived meanings as well, of course, and some would say other essential meanings. And this is this is important. Does the person get out of the 12th? No. Moran is in the 12th.
Okay.
So everything goes there. So next you go, well, what else is what other sign is in the first? Oh, the enclosed Taurus. So where's the domicile ruler of Taurus? Venus in the 12th. Where is the exaltation ruler? Moon in the 12th. And so here you do look at that Saturn. That definitely affects the celestial state of the moon as the exaltation ruler of Taurus, because we're not focused here on the moon as a dispositor, but just as a ruler. So that does harm Mars. That does harm the moon's celestial state. Venus is an excellent celestial. She's in exaltation and high honor. The exaltation, like fall, is an exaggerated condition, and she's not in her domicile. So you have to look at her dispositor to see, is this a stable exaltation, and or is it not? And she's disposed to a very good Jupiter. So this stabilizes and helps that exaltation.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's not spend a lot of time. You would do similar kinds of assessment of these second rulers, but what we see is that they're in the 12th, they're in Pisces, and they're disposed to Jupiter. One thing, that's good. We'll leave it at there for now.
Okay.
The next thing you go on to is planets located in the house. Now, I have to qualify this. If we were looking at any other house but the first, we would have started with planets located in the house. Location is the most efficacious determination, followed by rulership, then aspect. But because it's the first, I always am just like, where's that ruler? And of course, your eye catches the planets, but I don't delineate the first house planets. I don't look at them in much detail. I might notice what house they rule or houses, but I don't know that everyone would do it that way, but I go right to the first ruler and then back to the planets located.
It seems that we have the lot of fortune in the first house,
We
right?
do. And I'm not going to.
Does Morat delineate the lot?
Yes, it's the only lot that he accepts. And he has a passage, it might be in, I'm not sure which book it's in, it might be in book 13 on the planets, but I'm not certain. He argues for why he uses it. I find it an interesting argument, but it seems to me it would apply also to the lot of spirit. But he argues for why he uses it, which is essentially because it is connected to the ascendant, so it has a determination in the chart, and to the lights and their relationship to each other. So, and that kind of goes back to your question about the soul in at least an oblique way. But that's why he uses it, and he does use it for sure. And we see here in Taurus, disposed to this exalted Venus on the 12th cusp. Good, disposed in a sign with an analogy to wealth and resources. The earthly signs have an analogy to resources. So that's and security. So with the analogy to resources, good, and disposed to an exalted Venus, good in the 12th. So there's a mixed bag. This 12th house of Morinus is like a mixed bag, always something good, oh, and the 12th, like a pall that hangs over the chart in a way, creating everything is like, but then there's going to be a problem because there's a lot of that in the chart. So you look for amelioration as you also acknowledge, but then even when there are honors, there is something. So, so we notice the part of fortune in the first, good, because it's a good part of fortune that also gets these sextiles from the Pisces planet. So it doesn't well, it does also get this sextile from let's see, is that yeah. So but it's a good part of fortune. You can expect good coming to Moran from that part of fortune, and he does it does come into play when he has directions and revolutions that bring him good. So then we get to aspects, first to the ascendant. And that's followed by to the ascendant ruler. Now we've noticed aspects to the ascendant ruler because the dispositor's aspect. And all of them aspect, all three, I mean, all, my dog again, Volker.
I was wondering, we have done quite a little bit of complex delineation. It's not necessary that we continue with the whole delineation because the viewers get an impression what Morinus technique does. So if you want to come to an end at this point and care for your dog, this would be a good, would be a probable moment.
Oh, well, I've said very little of what I would like to say, but
Yeah, but you know,
but that's up to you. It's your
I think what we did very beautifully is to show the difference of Morinus' determination doctrine to what the viewers coming from a psychological astrology point of view have never heard before, right?
I don't know what they've heard, but I know
They wouldn't delineate like you did.
no, and
Definitely.
this we haven't even finished the first step, and
Yes,
if you want to stop, things would speed up as we go,
yeah,
but
but you have to realize we are already more than 1.5 hours.
that's fine. No, Volker, I'm not arguing for it. I just want
I
people
would
to know.
suggest I would
I just
suggest
want people to know. But just let me say this: I'm totally fine. It's your decision. I'm totally fine with stopping. I just want people to know that this is just scratching the surface.
great.
We haven't even finished the delineation of the ascendant, and
Exactly. And
so
this is
I
what
want
this was my goal for this second session,
to.
to give an impression how it is done, how a concrete delineation looks like, and how different the
Mhm.
focuses are. We are now more than 1.5 hours and we are still on the ascendant line. Like Sultan Mason said when he was asked for 60 minutes, how long would be the ascendant? And he would say 60 minutes.
A
I
good movie,
remember
yeah.
that. So basically what I would say is my goal to demonstrate delineation with the Morinus technique is fulfilled. But if you want to continue, I leave that to you. My goal
No,
is my goal is reached with this, but if you
good.
if you if you think it's better to fulfill the whole thing and do another 90 minutes, that's okay with me.
No, no, it's your goal. It's your podcast. I'm totally fine to follow you on this, Volker. Completely fine.
So basically, what we are saying is, so you could go out of your screen now, so we can continue seeing you in full.
Let me get there. Just a minute. I have to find I have,
Because I have to do something extra as well when you are out of the screen.
okay. Let me just get these things where I can find that. Where is that stop sharing button, Volker?
That is in my Zoom. It's on the down at the bottom with green, with the green, the black arrow in the green field.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm
and
having,
and, and if you have to get out, it's on the top, I think. In my case, it's on the top to stop the sharing. If
yeah, I'm having this problem. My Zoom window kind of went away. Show meeting. Okay, here we go. All right, I had to get back to the meeting. I had somehow clicked something or other. Stop sharing.
right, stop sharing.
And where it's all the way on the right, or
No, it should disappear, but you didn't stop the sharing. Oh no,
no, I know. Let's see.
you didn't
Um,
stop the sharing.
yeah, where is that button? Tell me again, please.
In my case, it's on the top. It's red. Stop sharing.
Mm-hmm. I clicked the wrong button, so now let's see.
I stopped the recording for a moment. So now I have to do something I forgot in the beginning. The copyright thing. Okay, for everybody. The copyright regulation. I only have the right to publish our discussion uncut and unedited, and Penelope has the right to do whatever she wants to do with the MP4, which I will send to her via Swiss sharing. So Penelope has the right to do whatever she likes to do with the MP4. So we can get over that. And the homepage is this on astrotalk.fonabisw.de. We have a subsite talk with Penelope Sitter, and the part one we did last time is here, and the part two will be here. And this is the book that she translated, Morin's book 21. And here's an information about Alexei Borealis. And because of Penelope, we had a wonderful talk with Alexei as
Yes,
well
excellent,
on our
excellent.
YouTube channel. And there is um, the talk with Chris Brennan Penelope did have. Now let's find out where that was. Talk of Penelope Sitter with Chris Brennan, which is a very long talk about this book, the book 21. So you should watch that for an additional information. And today the goal by my side was to demonstrate how to delineate using the Morinus technique. And we didn't finish, but the viewers got an impression. And if they want to have the whole thing, you do still have clients, right?
Yes, I'm working on a writing project, so I'm minimizing it, but I'm not completely unavailable.
So
If they,
if somebody wants to experience the total delineation technique, he can book you as
yes, that
as an
yes, that,
astrologer and can experience. Today we nearly finished the ascendant. We were close to coming to an end for the ascendant, and the next step would have been the midheaven, right?
yes,
And after the midheaven, you would have delineated the sun.
the moon and the sun, although I was going to pretty much skip over those so that we could get to other things.
Okay, what would be the other things we would have done
Well,
today?
extraordinary considerations, some of which we mentioned. And
Okay.
then we would start looking at, I was going to look at how do we see that Moran will have honors? How do we see that he'll be an astrologer? How do we see that he'll have a lot of illness? How do we see that he'll be in his life will multiple times be in great danger? How do we see that on account of a famous woman, he was almost shot to death, receiving a bullet just a bit below his heart and to his left thigh on account of a famous woman in his youth? How do we see that he had so many hidden enemies? How do we see him positioned in 17th century France with
So
all the
we're
first?
talking about a 10-hour session, right?
Well, as I was saying, things would have gone much more quickly because I was laying
Yeah.
how
Yep.
to use things. Just a minute, Mom. The other thing I do want to say this, Volker, all of these things are potentials in the natal chart. You have to see nothing occurs in the life that's not a potential of the natal. And the way you know whether the potentials will be actualized, will be brought into reality, and when is through primary directions and solar revolutions, and then narrowing down with lunar revolutions. And Moran also directs the solar and lunar revolution charts, and then finally transits to get it narrowed down to a few days. As Alexi Borealis shows beautifully in his predictive astrology textbook, published now by the Wessex Astrologer.
Yes.
So I really want to say that, and that this didn't give a sense, really. It showed you how to do some of this detailed, use some of the detailed rules, but you don't get a sense without seeing more of, well, why are you doing all those things? But
Yes.
that's fine, because if it piques people's curiosity, they can study with Robert Corey in
Yes.
his on astrology,
Yes.
and they can read Alexi's book and go to his website and his YouTube channel. And I believe Alexi is going to have an online natal astrology course in English. He has one now in English and horary, and both in Russian. So there are many ways to learn this. And this brilliant astrologer who has been so so overlooked, and we can't say inexplicably, look at the chart, look at the 12th house, look at the Pisces, look at the combustion. He's been overlooked in ways that are just kind of stunning, given the absolute quality and importance of this brilliant work. When I found Moran through Robert, I just said, that's what I've been looking for.
So
This
basically, what we found out is it's worthwhile to read Morin. Then it's
yes,
and if you want to study and if you want to have an experience how his method works, they can book you as an astrologer. The viewers,
yes.
if the viewer is an astrologer himself, he can book the course for astrologers with Alexei Borealis. And if he's a layperson and not an astrologer, he can book the online course with Robert Corey.
Well, if he's an astrologer, for astrologers, I highly recommend Robert Corey's class.
As well, yes.
Practicing astrologer, even in the first quarter of Robert's course, said the scales fell from his eyes.
So
He had been practicing
basically the
years.
picture is there's a lot of information available if one wants to have it.
Yes.
And it's and we will have hopefully Robert Corey will come on this podcast in September. So basically we got a sort of picture of what Morinus determination doctrine is like. And for the viewers, we thank Penelope Sitter very much for taking 2 times the time to give us an inside look, a glimpse of inside look in what is possible with Morinus doctrine. And myself, thank you very much for doing this. And
Thank you, Volker.
so I stopped the recording.